welcome to the Young Healthwatch Hillingdon podcast. My name is Aman and I'm a Young Healthwatch member, along with two others.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm also a Young Healthwatch member.
Hi, I'm Zoya, and I too am a Young Healthwatch representative.
And we also have Kim from Healthwatch Hillingdon with us.
Hi everybody, my name is Kim. I'm the Children and Young People's Engagement Officer for Healthwatch Hillingdon, and I support Young Healthwatch.
So, Young Healthwatch Hillingdon is a group of volunteers aged 11 to 25 who work to make sure the voices of children and young people are represented through health and social care services. We do this through social media and events which bring the community closer together. So Young Healthwatch wanted to reach out to people in new ways, as well as the podcast being a good way of reaching young people. Overall, we just wanted to make sure young people get reliable, trustworthy information from professionals.
So the topic of today's podcast is mental health, and more specifically myth-busting, because this is a really important issue because a lot of people are hearing myths every day and beginning to believe them. So myths can affect everyone, but particularly vulnerable individuals who are suffering with their mental health. And in order to help bust our myths, we have with us Anita and Jeff from CAMHS. So can you please introduce yourselves, your roles, and what CAMHS actually is?
Hi, I'm Anita. I'm the assistant psychologist here at Hillingdon CAMHS. So CAMHS basically stands for Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So we work with kind of anyone under 18. Presentations kind of differ between everyone, but we get kind of cases with people with anxiety, so like social anxiety. We get some depression cases, and then we've also got people who have or are wanting to get a diagnosis of ADHD and then autism. So we've got quite a varied group of people that are being referred to our service, and these include referrals from like GPs and schools and parents. So we kind of work with them to provide therapy, so that might be in the form of like CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, or psychotherapy. So we kind of offer quite a varied group of therapies, and medication as well is also available. So that's what CAMHS kind of provides for people in our borough.
Yep. Hi, my name is Jeff. I'm a child wellbeing practitioner. So as Anita says, I am one of the practitioners who kind of work with both young people and parents to kind of help with, as you know, kind of anxiety, kind of low moods, and sort of kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. So that's kind of my role in the team.
Okay, cool. So now you've met all of us, we'd like to start with explaining the difference between mental health versus mental illness. So Anita and Jeff, please can you explain the difference?
Yeah, I can try. I believe that there is a difference between mental health and mental illness, but what I like to do is draw comparisons by replacing the word mental with physical. So to kind of gauge some discussion between everyone else, what do you think is the difference between physical health and mental illness?
So I think physical health like focuses around your body and how you keep yourself healthy, like food wise and exercise wise, and mental health is more about how you treat yourself, like self-care and depression and anxiety and all of these disorders.
Yeah,
I believe both have incorporate each other really well, and you need to have a good mental health to have a good physical health, and you need to have a good physical health to have a good mental health.
That's great. That's really good answers, really good. So for me, I believe that mental health is something that everyone has. You know, we need to make sure that we kind of exercise it enough, but also making sure that kind of we are resting it as well, because rest is really important. So for example, if we draw comparisons to kind of physical health, if you want to build up your fitness, you wouldn't want to run a marathon every day. So we need to make sure that if we're working on our mental health, we need to make sure that we can take time to ourselves, rest, and make sure that we kind of recuperate from that as well. So I also believe that being able to maintain a good kind of mental health is a good way of reducing your chances of mental illness. So however, having very good mental health doesn't mean that you can never become mentally ill. So just like an athlete can be injured as well. But the good news is that there are services that provide support for such for those who are feeling mentally unwell, and such as our service CAMHS, and also there's adult services as well. So for mental illness, I like to compare it to, say, physical illness. So for physical illness, you can say something like someone can catch a cold or have flu symptoms, and that's something that's comparable to someone who may have depression, for example. There are ways in which that we can work towards building up and helping you manage these illnesses, and then hopefully drawing upon what we've experienced of service, and yourselves work together to think of ways to help.
I love that comparison of like, you wouldn't run a marathon every day if you wanted to get fit. Because if you think about it, every day we're using our brains and our emotions are constantly engaged. So, you know, I guess the equivalent of running a marathon would be to, like, you know, you're getting up, you're going to school or you're going to work, there might be things going on in your personal life, you know, we're bombarded with messages from the world, and all of that is kind of adding up to a bit of an emotional and mental marathon, isn't it? So I like that idea of having to kind of take a bit of a break and a step back from that.
I think that kind of leads on really nicely as well to, I guess, the main one of the big theories in psychology which we follow is the biopsychosocial model. So what it talks about is there's three main factors which influences someone's mental health. So you've got the biological factors, so that may be whether you've got genes which may make you more prone to certain illnesses, more anxiety. So if you've got family history of mental health, and the genes involved with that, and also like your brain neurology involved. And then psycho, which is psychological factors. So you've got the way you perceive the world and other people around you. So what you're internally saying to yourself. And then you've got psychological factors, which are life experiences, which can impact your mental health. So this can be in the form of whether you've got stressors outside in your environment, which might be in fact impacting your mental health. So all these factors might make you more prone to getting certain mental health illnesses, but then it doesn't necessarily mean it's the case for everyone. So I guess the thing we want to say to everyone is that not everyone's experience is the same, so it varies between everyone. And also I think as well with mental health, we like to talk a lot about having poor mental health or mental illness, but then having positive mental health. So I guess that's all the stuff about self-care and appreciating who you are. And there's a lot as well which people don't really talk about, your mental health being really good, and people don't really walk around saying, oh yeah, I've got really good mental health. So I feel like we need to recognize that as well. Yeah, because that's just as important as recognizing when you don't have as good as mental health as you normally would. There's a lot to it, but I guess it's always as well someone's understanding of mental health can be different, but it's drawing up on little bits as well.
Yeah, thanks. That really helped to understand the difference between mental health and mental illness, because I think sometimes they're perceived as the same thing, but obviously there's big differences between the two. And looking at real life situations like the marathon, that really helps to understand it in real life situations and sort of get your head around it, I guess. So
I just wanted
now
to vote and ask if anybody actually wants to run a marathon.
Probably not.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, so now we've got some myths to bust. So if I hand over and we name a few of the myths that we've been hearing lately.
So, ignore it and it'll go away.
So this is one which bothers me, but then I guess it's a myth and it's going to bother people. But so what we like to say, and it's like a core component to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the therapies we use to help people with anxiety. So whilst ignoring it might be a short-term solution, I think immediately people think, okay, let's just avoid it, let's ignore it, sweep it under the rug. and then we'll come back and address it later, which you probably would never come back and address it. But it's one of those things which short-term wise, you kind of think that's the solution. But in the long term, things like this can kind of build up and up and up to a point where it gets to a place where you can't manage it any further. So we kind of want to say, which we kind of trying to tell people not to avoid kind of their worries and anxieties, but try and face it and see if they can manage it. Because a lot of times as well, we might think it's unmanageable, but when you kind of confront it, you realize, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And also, I don't know if this kind of helps, but there was a book that I kind of read when I was a lot younger, and I kind of use this analogy a lot as well. But it's a bag full of worries. So it's, yeah, Kim kind of heard of it as well. So it's basically like this story of this young girl, and it's all cartoons, it's all animated, which is really nice. And she basically has this bag full of worries. So every time she experiences a worry, she puts it in her bag and kind of just addresses it when she needs to, but it's just something which she just throws behind her and doesn't think about throughout the day. But the thing is as the days went by, her bag eventually started to get a lot heavier, and it became really unmanageable to the point where she couldn't really function. The bag was weighing her down so much, it was getting in the way of how she was socializing with other people, and her mood. And so eventually she kind of just started taking things out of these bags, try to address them, like, are they really worrying me at this point, or can I just throw it away because it doesn't mean anything to me anymore? So she addressed it and her bag got a lot lighter. And it's kind of like what we say with people with anxiety. We just say some things you kind of just need to confront face on and see whether it is as bad as you kind of think it is. And if it is, then we can kind of work on steps to make it a bit more manageable. But I definitely don't think ignoring it is a good thing. I think it's one of those things where like you'll just keep ignoring it and it'll just end up getting too overwhelming that you just can't function anymore.
I love that.
So I say,
and like I guess the key message is there is like just reach out for help, isn't it? And also I think I know, you know, this is our first podcast, but I think at this point I'm supposed to say something like Anita is not sponsored by the writer of A Bag Full of Worries, and there are lots of other self-help books out there.
Yes.
But
yeah, there's loads of books. I think no, definitely. I think there's I feel like now as well there's loads of books coming out which are explaining kind of these things to children to make it more understandable. So I definitely suggest like trying seeing these books, because I think as well, even as an adult, these books do help to kind of explain it in a way which gets rid of all the faff, but just very straightforward in a way which you can understand it. And then I kind of use these examples in my like cases, and try and explain it that way.
Just a question for the Young Healthwatch members. Have you guys heard of the Shelf Help program?
No.
So they are self-help mental health books for young people, and they're available in all Hillingdon libraries. So just wanted to kind of put that out there as well. But I'm going to stop interrupting now. Who's got myth number 2?
So myth number 2 is it's just a phase.
Okay, I'll try to answer that one. I think sometimes you could, I think it's very different how people see it. Sometimes you could kind of call it a phase, sometimes it is a bit invalidating to call it a phase. But for example, I think with young people, especially kind of knowing that, you know, our bodies change, there's a lot of hormones, it can very frequently be seen as a phase thing. Like, for example, like maybe adults might be like, oh yeah, well, you know, they're just going through puberty, that's why they're having so many difficulties. But I think it's important to know that actually, even if it is, I guess you can kind of technically class it as a phase because it's a phase in time, a period of time. It's also important to know that, you know, with mental health difficulties, as Anita kind of said, like if you don't confront it, if you don't kind of challenge some of these difficulties, it can be a difficulty that follows you for kind of through adulthood. And, you know, it can you know, it can be very difficult, and it could impact on a lot of kind of key life stages that we go through. So for example, for a young person going through doing maybe GCSEs or like going to university, it can kind of affect them in a lot of negative ways, which is why I think for me it's kind of learning about how to manage these difficulties early on. And because with mental health, I think one of the most important things is to mention is that with mental health, a lot of the times it's not about curing a problem or fixing a problem. It's more about kind of this is kind of the difficulty we have, is learning to kind of manage and adapt to the situation. So to call it a phase, I think can be very misleading, but I can kind of see why some people would. What do you all think about that?
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's a phase in time, but then also I think it is quite undermining for someone who's going through like something at the time. For example, a teenager, like maybe they're suffering with stress at the time of their exams. For someone to say that it's just a phase, that could just really like knock them back, I think, and it could also stop them from seeking help.
Yeah, I agree with what Ellie's saying. Like, when you tell somebody, oh, it's just a phase, you'll get over it and stuff. Like, if somebody said that to me, I'd be like, but it's not. I'm like suffering. I need help now, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I think that's what I was trying to say about the invalidating thing. I think when someone else doesn't kind of realize that actually this difficulty that you're facing it really is kind of affecting your daily life, that can be, as you said, very demoralizing, can't it? And it will really discourage you from seeking support, and that's not what we want to do.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, and I think it's really important as well that sometimes the first kind of step to getting help, or this first step to getting better, is knowing that there's someone that can kind of empathize with you and just listen to you. Because I think as well, people who generally say it's just a phase are quite dismissive, and they might just brush away your kind of worries and seem like it's not as big as it is. But I think to sit with someone who would kind of listen to you and talk with you and kind of find out why you're experiencing those worries and in this kind of period in time, then it's kind of like the first step is acknowledging kind of your mental health, and then what we can do to kind of get you in the right track. But it's, yeah, I think having someone that you can talk to, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional as well, it can be your friend or your parents or your siblings. It's always nice kind of having that support around you, and someone who won't just kind of make it seem like you don't deserve the right to kind of voice your mental health struggles, because everyone does, and everyone experiences their own kind of struggles in their own way.
Yeah. And also, like, if you know, there's lots of good services where you can do that and reach out somewhat anonymously if you don't have necessarily feel that you've got somebody directly that you can talk to, and we'll link to that at the end. And I guess, you know, even if one person says it's a phase, try and not let that scare you from asking somebody else for help.
Exactly, that's one person's opinion at the end of the day, and I'm pretty sure there's so many other people in the world that want to help you, that want you to listen to what you have to say, and there's probably so many people as well that can relate to what you're saying as well. So it's like, don't ever kind of feel like you're not kind of worthy, or because someone else has told you that your mental health is just a phase, it's just something you'll get over. I feel like that's just what someone has to say, and it's like, it's just external noise that shouldn't really affect you. If anything, it will make you worse, but it's just something you just need to kind of.
And I think Anita's kind of got the point that you are not alone. You know, there are going to be other people who go through very similar things to you, so it's always good to kind of seek some support.
Yeah,
great.
There's always people that want to help.
Okay, so the next myth, I think we see it a lot surrounding men. So there's a big stereotype like men don't cry. And then, so the myth is seeking help shows you're weak. So
I kind of just, for me, I just feel like in a way seeking help shows that you're strong enough to kind of make a change. And that is something which is we always say here at CAMHS as well that coming and getting a referral and being open to therapy is one of the biggest steps you can to making change, and that in itself is therapy. Like we say, you actually like engaging or just sitting and listening to us is big in itself, because you're willing to kind of make that change. So I don't think in any way seeking help is a weakness. I think it just makes you strong, and it makes you realize that you can make a change in your own mental health, and you're kind of putting those steps in place. So yeah, so I wouldn't ever discredit someone who wants to seek help. I just think, yeah, they deserve a lot of kind of support and praise, because a lot of people do feel like not seeking help and they can kind of deal with it alone, which probably works for some people, but I think, yeah, you're just speaking out and you're kind of like paving a way as well for
It's
people
brave.
who, yeah, it's very brave.
Definitely. And I think seeking help is kind of almost the first step, isn't it, to the road of recovery. And I think the first step's always the hardest. And I totally agree with Anita. It's such a brave thing, and I know there are kind of, as you mentioned earlier, about kind of a lot of specifically kind of men feeling kind of there's that kind of masculinity kind of thing where they don't feel like they can seek help because it conveys weakness. But I know there have been kind of loads of news articles. So for example, there's a football player called Danny Rose. I don't know whether you guys have heard of him before. He suffered with a lot of mental health difficulties as well, and he really kind of spoke out to it. And he's kind of been interviewed by the BBC a few times about kind of mental health, and he's really kind of been an advocate for kind of pushing towards this kind of, like men shouldn't be afraid to do this. Men should try to do that, but it's not just for men as well. It's going to be difficult for, I think, anyone. And I think it kind of comes back to the previous kind of point that I made before, is that you're never alone, really. There's always going to be at least someone who feels very similar to you, like you're feeling the same kind of maybe anxieties or maybe the low moods. You might even share the same reason as to why you're feeling these kind of things, and it's about kind of seeking support and kind of talking to more people about it. I think for me, that's not weak at all. That's really brave, and I respect people who can do that a lot.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so with the next one, people with mental health problems can't work.
So this one, I just want to throw in a little stats in there, but just to kind of bring in the facts. But so if we consider stats that like 1 in 4 people have mental health difficulties, if you kind of consider that in terms of us right now, there's 6 of us. So that means at least one of us here probably has a mental health difficulty. So I think when you kind of put that in perspective, you realize that in a work environment, you don't know as well who has mental health difficulty. And I think there are people that do. And I think a lot of people, having mental health difficulty doesn't make you unable to function in a work environment. And as well, a lot of people are quite good at masking as well. So they might cover up the fact that they've got mental health difficulty. You've also got people who might throw themselves into their work and be very good at their work to kind of avoid thinking about like what their struggles are. So I feel like having a mental health problem doesn't make you incapable of working. There's kind of no stats to show that it does make you incapable of working. It's just something that which people have this like perception that because you're kind of got depression, you just can't function in real life. And I think as well, everything is very situation based as well. With anxiety, you can have social anxiety where you're anxious in social situations, but when you're in a room alone in the clinic or something, you're working perfectly fine. Or people that are working from home, like it's all very, you have to kind of think about the context as well. And I think as well, oh sorry, I think I interrupted Jeff, but I think it's just this negative perception people have on mental health. I think they think that if you've got like these kind of mental worries, that everything else in your body doesn't work. but that's not the case.
And I think to add to what Anita said about the masking thing is that, as you said, like, you can never know what somebody's kind of feeling inside or experiencing inside, because, and I again like to draw the comparison to physical ailments. If somebody's broken their leg, you can clearly see, well, hopefully they'll have a cast on or something and they've gone to the doctors, but you can clearly see that, you know, they have something that's clearly bothering them, that they are in pain. But with mental health, it's a lot harder because it's more internal, isn't it? It's more inside.
The next myth is people with mental health problems are always violent and unpredictable.
Do you want to go for this one, Anita? I think we both have very, very similar views on this one.
Yeah, so this is one of those stigmas which is with everyone kind of has this thought, but it's not true. I think it's just an overgeneralization, or probably, I think as well, a lot of it comes from like the media as well. I think their presentation of people with mental health difficulties isn't very great. They kind of present them as being overly aggressive or overly violent, and that's not the case. And I think as well that kind of leads on to people not wanting to seek help, or thinking that their mental health difficulties, because it doesn't present in that way, it doesn't mean that they have any. So there's a lot of stigma kind of originate from like the media's portrayal of mental health difficulties, and kind of the news as well, like how they almost say like this person's violent, or they've got mental health difficulties or something. It's like that association, which isn't exactly true. And as well, I've got another stats as well, but we've actually found that like people with mental health difficulties are actually 10 times more likely to be a victim themselves more than a perpetrator. I think it's to do with a lot of their vulnerabilities. And I think as well, when you kind of look at that, you kind of realize it's almost like invalidating people who aren't aggressive, making them seem like, oh, because you're not aggressive, you don't have mental health difficulties. But that's not the case, because mental health difficulties can present in every kind of way. And like you can mask it, it can be internal. Some people might have mental health difficulty and they don't even know fully what it is. And it's really difficult for people seeking help, because they're like, oh, I'm not acting out to anyone else, so I can just mask it and kind of brush it away because it's not affecting anyone. So yeah, but yeah, it's just a false stigma everyone has of mental health. And I don't know if Jeff has anything to add.
Oh no, I totally agree. I think you're right in every point you made. Is we can't control what the media portray, but what we can control is how we look at things and how we perceive certain things. And hopefully this will reach out to people, and who would, you know, hopefully this is thought-provoking enough that people would kind of see that, you know, mental health doesn't equal violence.
Just feeds into that stigma, doesn't it?
And I guess this is kind of similar to like people not being able to work. It's just one of those things which I think there's this idea that people with mental health are just overly aggressive, can't function, and that's not the case. And it's quite annoying that it's kind of like that's the perception of mental health as well, because I don't know where it kind of originated from, whether it was the media or there was this one film that presented someone with mental health in this way, and all of a sudden it's just spanned across for several generations.
Yeah.
But also I think it's like a lot of it as well is very generational. It can be brought down from like kind of family ideas of mental health as well. And I can't lie as well. I think like some people in my family, some people in my culture believe as well that like mental health kind of presents as people who are violent. And I think is that stigma, which is the reason why I wanted to do psychology as well. It's just one of those things which is so false that it's just almost like laughable, because it's like, how has this become what people believe? And it's like you're starting from kind of root upwards, trying to explain what mental health is and kind of work your way up to explain it and allow them to understand it a bit more. But yeah.
What you know, because this is a podcast, what people can't see is just how like everybody's faces are just kind of like, this is so frustrating. This is such a myth.
Yeah, exactly. It's so frustrating. I think it's one of those things that like, that's why I'm so glad this podcast is happening, because everyone, and I think as well, a lot of people do know that these are myths as well, but then it's almost like, what are the facts though that can like debunk this? Like, what, if it's not true, then what is? And I think that's kind of like what me and Jeff are trying to do, and hopefully like other people that are advocating for mental health as well, they're trying to kind of face the facts and explain the harsh truths of kind of mental health, because I feel like all of it is kind of, it's all turned very wishy-washy, where it's just all these kind of like opinions and stuff which have got in the way of what the actual truth is.
Yeah, it's a bit like the bag of worries, isn't it, Anita?
Yeah.
We gotta face these kind of difficulties. I think because mental health is so misunderstood, people tend to, I guess, ignore it, or they try to kind of avoid it. But it's, you know, it really is time to really move on and really talk about it and face the music,
Yeah.
as they would say.
So the next myth is therapy and self-help are a waste of time.
I think I'll take this one, Anita,
Yeah,
because I am a child wellbeing practitioner at CWP. What I normally do is kind of work with young people as well as their parents with kind of guided self-help and therapy. And I think different people would respond differently. You know, everyone is different and unique in their own way. They may see things differently. That's why there's so many different forms of therapy. You know, like obviously there's kind of CBT based help, so cognitive behavioral therapy based help, and then there's also something called psychoanalysis, which is personally I'm not a big fan of, but it's kind of looking at kind of look at your past and doing all these things. But everyone different, even different therapists have their own kind of different views on it. But statistically speaking, when you get kind of talking therapies as well as medication at the same time, that is the most effective way of helping someone with mental health difficulty.
So the next myth, children and young people don't experience mental health problems.
so me and my stats. Just gonna whack it out there, yeah. So there was stats that came out like last year, and it said 1 in 8 children in the UK experiencing mental health difficulties. So this stats has kind of been consistent for a while now, but then I guess when you kind of think about contextually now, speaking with COVID going on, this might increase or decrease. So there's a lot of things kind of impacting the stats out there. But I think it's kind of false to say children don't experience mental health difficulties, because almost it's like, well, then what's the point of the service me and Jeff are working in? Because we work specifically with children. So it's like, if children didn't experience mental health difficulties, then this whole CAMHS would never have existed.
So many other services as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many services out there that support children. And I think there's a reason why we're here, is because there's a need for our services. So that obviously kind of proves that, yeah, children obviously do experience mental health difficulties. But with CAMHS, we kind of worked with the young person, with the family, and with the whole support network to kind of help them to a point where it tries to be a bit more manageable when they are getting older. So yeah, I think obviously like mental health difficulties, I think it affects anyone and everyone. It's not something that only affects adults, or it's not something that only affects women, or only affects kind of a certain race of people or something. It's something that can affect everyone. And I don't think it should ever be kind of limited to the point where it doesn't affect children, because I think there are plenty of children that experience mental health difficulties, as our stats kind of show. And yeah, and CAMHS, kind of the whole reason of CAMHS is to help these young people kind of manage and yeah, help them get in the right track and kind of get on with their lives and not be limited because of their mental health difficulties.
I think in terms of mental health, being aware of it's so misunderstood still. You know, I think awareness of mental health has improved drastically even over the past 10 years. But I think personally, I think if we were able to kind of talk more about it kind of at school and stuff, it would be kind of a really good kind of way, because, you know, most kids go to school. I think it's a good way to kind of spread the message.
Yeah,
So hoping if there's any teachers listening, please add it to your PSHE schedule, please.
Okay, so Anita and Jeff, are there any myths you'd like to bust?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like you've covered a lot of the myths which kind of I've always heard and kind of saw floating around.
Definitely.
And I think as well, there's a lot of these myths as well. I'm kind of speaking from like my kind of community cultural background, but like a lot of these myths are what people still believe now. And I know it's not just kind of fixed to certain cultures. I think everyone in this kind of world believes these myths. And I think as well, as much as people try to like bring kind of exposure and awareness to mental health, I think it's something which like one person needs to believe it and then pass it on to another people. It's something which has to kind of be discussed and brought about, and it's very much generational as well. I think your understanding will impact your future children and their understanding, and then that will impact their future children, and it's kind of making the first step to kind of eradicating these myths.
I agree, because I think we're living in we're lucky enough, I guess, to live in an age where mental health is becoming a bit more prominent, a bit more spoken about, especially with the current kind of situation we find ourselves in at the moment. There are a lot of kind of people who kind of need that kind of support, that support to get through this kind of difficult time we're all facing. And as Anita says, like for me personally, I come from a kind of Chinese background culturally. My family is from Chinese background, and even kind of between my, I guess, generation and kind of my parents' generation, there is a lot of kind of misunderstanding or kind of what's that brush it under the rug kind of attitude towards it. And we're the kind of agents of change, really, and we want to be the ones, I guess, to really take this opportunity to affect change. So I'm starting to sound really political. But,
no, that's such a great message. And kind of I think it's with Young Healthwatch.
I think especially with like social media, it can be like a blessing and a curse. I think social media is both what causes people a lot of anxieties and worries, but also it's a good platform for getting a message across. And I think especially with mental health, you see a lot more like celebrities and social media influencers out there that are like trying to bring more awareness to mental health. I think stuff like that is always a good way to kind of speak to a large group of people in such a quick time, because lectures and stuff will be helpful, but it will only reach a certain number of people. But definitely think like we are kind of like the people that we're the generation that I think will definitely make a change in the world, and we're a lot more open to understanding and listening to people's perspectives and understandings of stuff. So I definitely think like this is like the first step to progressing into a world where like the stigma slowly kind of gets eradicated.
Yeah, I think as well, like if you are finding Instagram like a toxic environment, then it's important to look at who you're following and
exactly.
follow people who might, like promote well-being and like look at more people like charities and stuff who will support you, rather than people who are just trying to look good themselves and make you feel worse about yourself, because most of the time the pictures that you are seeing on Instagram aren't necessarily what these people look like in real life. So I think you need to think about what's realistic and what's just Photoshop most of the time.
Exactly. And you're only seeing a small kind of segment of their life. You don't know what's going on in the background. And I think as well, that's like mental health. You're only seeing kind of the face level of it, but you don't know what's going on kind of behind the scenes. And so that's why I think it's something which is like all the stuff about people being violent or people not being able to work. That's just your assumption. That doesn't mean that's what's happening on the inside. And I think the only way to understand properly what is going on the inside is to talk to them and kind of listen to them. I feel like you can't just make an assumption on someone based on what they look like. But really there's so much more involved. And I think once you kind of see that, oh yeah, they're not as, I don't know, aggressive as I think they look, that's always kind of the first step in like empathizing with someone.
Definitely. And I think,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, it's just like saying, I think we've all learnt it since we were young, is not to judge a book by its cover. And
Yeah.
this is, mental health is exactly what it is, you know, like the cover is what we can see, but what's happening inside, we will never know until you speak to them or you ask them, and, you know.
Yeah, so just to start finishing up on the myths, we'd like one top tip from each of you on how you think we should look after our mental health and well-being.
Ooh.
Would you like to go first, Anita?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a tip which I kind of try and tell myself, and I think I try and tell a lot of people as well. But and I also feel like I don't know if I followed this myself as well, so I feel like a bit of a
We're all
hypocrite.
guilty of that.
But yeah, I guess my main tip would probably be to not be too worried about what other people think, and I think it's a lot easier said than done. I think we live in a world where there's so many opinions and so many people saying things which are getting in the way of what you're kind of doing. But I think in life, like, we are kind of our own biggest critics, and I think as long as you're kind of happy with yourself internally, I think that's kind of the biggest part you can do. And I think as well, people can see as well how happy you are with yourself and how confident you are. And that can kind of like shine for as far as it can. So I feel like, yeah, definitely kind of just kind of get on with your life and try not to worry about what other people are thinking, because I think you're kind of with yourself for the rest of your life, and some of these people will come and go, and they're just kind of voices that will just kind of disappear after a while. But I definitely think, yeah, just kind of love yourself. It's very kind of corny message, but yeah, I think it's very important.
Okay, so I guess kind of, if you don't mind me adding to it, Anita, I guess it's just kind of like, as you said, like sometimes something that I do with my sessions is kind of do something called unhelpful thinking styles. And mind reading or trying to predict what people think is one of the most kind of common things that come up with kind of my clients, for example, with the young people I work with. And so, yeah, I think Anita's right in the sense that, like, if we try not to think about how people might judge us, it could help us alleviate some anxieties, which I guess kind of goes on to my top tip, which is kind of about relaxation and resting, and kind of giving yourself an opportunity to mentally recharge. You know, it's being able to notice yourself if you're feeling a bit anxious, or you feel like you're a bit worried about something. It's just kind of making sure that you can have the opportunity to just kind of pause and stop and just think, okay, let me take a deep breath, let me have a think about this. Okay, so I'm worried about this. What is it that's kind of bothering me about the situation? Is there something that I can do to change this? And kind of having that kind of deep breath, that kind of breathing kind of exercise, it could really clear up, I think, the way that you think. Maybe I need to take a deep breath right now because maybe I'm getting a bit jumped up with my words.
We get it.
But if I might sneak in another top tip, is just kind of think about not just kind of about yourself, but maybe sometimes if you see someone who's looking a bit not quite themselves, don't be afraid to kind of just reach out and ask how they are. It's you know, sometimes asking someone how they are, it could really kind of turn the day around, you know, to show that kind of compassion and empathy.
It's definitely the little things in life, I think, people really take for granted. And I think just literally asking someone how they are is like one of the biggest things someone could kind of, who is experiencing some difficulties, is one of the biggest things they could ask for, is just to be recognized.
There's a campaign around at the moment, isn't there, which is like ask twice. So how are you? No, but how are you? And taking that time. I think it's time to change. But yeah, just
it's always the second time you ask that you get like the real
response.
The real response.
It's because I think it's all innate in us. When someone asks, how are you doing? You're like, yep, all right. And it's just kind of like, that is the normal kind of, almost like a normal thing is kind of drilled into us as a human reaction is just, yep, I'm okay. But then, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. But ask twice.
Yeah.
Or ask a third time if you have to.
Yeah.
But maybe try not to ask a fourth time, because it might, make their anxieties worse, or get them annoyed with you. So be conscious.
Okay, yeah, I think everything we've discussed and said, to me personally, has been very interesting. And as someone who's really passionate about mental health and everything that surrounds mental health, because I'd like to say that I'm fairly new to everything, and to see this from your perspective, I've found this truly interesting and I've really enjoyed it. So I want to take this opportunity to those who are listening to thank them for coming, and I'd like to especially thank Anita and Jeff for coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been so interesting.
Thanks for having us.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm actually very inspired, so thank you so much. And to end our podcast, I'd like to remind you all to not believe everything you hear and see, but be sure to only trust information from reputable sites. And some that I can personally suggest is the Young Healthwatch Coronavirus Hub. Yeah, promoting Young Healthwatch here. I'm sorry. I take credit. I'm sorry. I don't regret this. And of course, the CAMHS website. And then once again, thank you all. See you at our next podcast. Have a great day all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.